This episode is brought to you by SRB Field Rests. Your shotgun, bow, or rifle is an extension of who you are as a hunter. Whether you're hunting snows in a muddy mess of a field, mallards in the marsh, or whitetail from a ground blind, SRB Field Rests has your back. A local Kansas company that provides an easy-to-use, simple, and ergonomically effective solution to just awkwardly holding onto your gun or your bow when you do not need to, allowing you to have more freedom, comfort, and safety in the field. Enter discount code FOULFRONT at checkout for 10% off your order of any SRB Field Rest today. This episode is also brought to you by Oak Barn Beef, a direct-to-consumer, family-owned farm that delivers high-quality, DNA-tested, dry-aged Nebraska beef from their family to yours. You can select from a wide variety of boxes. My personal favorite is the Husker Beef package, which combines jerky, ground beef, steaks, and a brisket. These packages are perfect for families, get-togethers, out-of-town hunts, or for you outfitters looking to upgrade your table fare for your clients. Order yours today at oakbarnbeef.com. Welcome to the Foul Front Podcast, a part of the Waypoint Outdoor Collective. I'm your host, Ben Page, and this is your source for hunting, outdoors, and conservation conversations. In an eclectic and sometimes unorganized fashion, I appreciate you coming by. All right, today on the Foul Front, I'm joined by Wayne Saunders, a retired game warden and host of the Warden's Watch podcast. This was a super awesome interview. But yeah, let's just get into it. How you doing today, Wayne?
I'm doing great. And you, Ben?
I'm doing good. I'm glad to have you on here. Huge fan of your new podcast that's out, the Warden's Watch. I think you've made it pretty high. I think twice you've won my Friday episode countdown. I'm just a big fan of that. How is that going for you?
It's going extremely well, and thanks for being a fan, because that's, as you know, that's what we need as fans, and we need people to put out that information, other people that are going to enjoy it. And you know, as podcasters, I think we enjoy what we do. We talk about something we love. And when you make that connection and you can share that connection to whether it's a sportsman, sportswoman, someone that's in your, venue as far as a work job, whether you're a park ranger, a game warden, a U.S. Fish and Wildlife officer, to be able to share your experiences and others is just is dynamite, I think, because we just love hearing about catching the bad guy. And as a sportsman, I want to hear about catching the bad guy too. And game wardens love hearing other game wardens' stories. So it's a big sharing type of thing, of something that I love to do, and I love to catch the bad guy as a game warden. So I like sharing that with other people, and hopefully they like listening to it.
Yeah, I've had nothing but positive comments from the people that I have referred to your show. Some saying it's like cops for the radio for game wardens. It's great.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the poacher to get on there and, poo-poo it, because there's a few people out there that really don't care for me. Wow.
Yeah, well, I'm sure not some nefarious folk out there that don't like their game wardens.
No, absolutely, and there's a good reason they don't, and usually the game warden's not too fond of them. But on the other hand, I've always had some good relationships with poachers. It's kind of the cartoon with the sheepdog and the wolf. You know what he does, and he knows what you do. And the nice thing is, when you catch him, he's like, "You got me," and we go to court, and there's no problem. Then you get the other guy that you got red-handed, and he's like, "It's not me, it's not me, it's not me," until I throw a picture in front of him of him dumping out a bunch of bagels on a illegal bear site, and he's like, "How did you get that photo?" And I'm like, satellite imagery, man, no. So, but it wasn't that. I just told that story the other day. A guy that, violated, he preseason baited bears in New Hampshire. And, we knock on his door and we say, "Hey, we're here, Leo, because you preseason baited." He's like, "Yep, you got me." And I'm like, what a nice guy. And every time I see him, he busts my chops. I bust his chops. And, we move on, compared to the other guy that was in the same ring with him that denies until he gets that photo right in front of his face of him dumping out bagels, and the first words out of his mouth, "How did you get that picture?" And it's because I'm good at what I do. That's how I got that picture. But those are the types of those are the types of poachers we deal with as wardens. And I appreciate the guy that says, "Hey, you got me." The other guy that lies until you absolutely have him. Because when we do those arrest warrants, we make those arrests. We want to make it solid. And when we go to court, because we got to tell the judge and we got to convince the judge that this guy's guilty. So we want to have all the information and all the goods on these poachers. So, but I still appreciate the guy that gets caught and admits to it.
An interesting comment that I don't think many people would expect to hear. So not by definition, I think everybody knows by, definition what a poacher is, but to you, what makes a poacher?
Yeah, it's a guy that violates the law. It's stealing from everybody. So it may not be the night hunter. That's the typical poacher everybody thinks about, the jacklighter, the guy that goes intentionally out at night, shines deer and shoots them. Yeah, I guess I got a broader definition of a poacher. A poacher is a guy that has a bait pile behind his house that has the light on it. So when the light moves and the motion sensor comes on, he shoots his deer with his crossbow and he tags it legally, and that's the poacher. Or the guy that is driving out at night and sees that deer in his headlights and whacks it, 5 minutes after the illegal portion. Or the guy that illegal bear baits, a month preseason to get a jump on everybody else that's hunting legally. So I guess most game violations, I would classify, if you're intentionally violating the law, I'd call you a poacher. Now, there's those guys that unintentionally do it, which that's not, I don't put them in the same line as the poacher. Some guys, failure to tag your deer upon killing. Some guys get all excited and they shoot a huge buck. This is very common too. They drag it out and they almost get into the car and there's a game warden standing in front of them with a flashlight and like, "Hey guys, how you doing?" And he's all excited, "Oh, I just shot this 8-point buck and it's my first or second, my biggest deer ever." And I'm like, "Yeah, and did you tag it?" And all of a sudden the fear of God comes into their face and they're like, not yet, but that guy didn't mean to violate. That guy was excited. That guy, and that comes from a little experience too, as get a little experience under your belt. You can tell the type of people you're dealing with. That guy didn't intentionally violate. Did he technically violate by not tagging that deer? Yes, he technically violated. Am I going to take that nice buck that he's all excited about? Absolutely not. That's crazy, but unintentional violation. But then you get the intentional violation, the can't meet you hear. So the guy that shoots the skipper and they never tag it. Yeah. So, or the ducks that they stash in there and, no one's around. I'll stash these underneath the seat so I can go get another limit. So those guys are poachers. So it's not the unintentional thing. The guy that shoots, one shot, he's got some of his limit there. Let's say you're only allowed one hen mallard. You shoot and you drop 2 hen mallards with one shot. And I've seen it happen, and that's the unintentional guy. That's that. Geez, I violated, but did he mean to violate? No. Does that go in his buddy's bag that didn't have his 2 female mallards? Probably yes. And they continue on. So now the warden watches that. He's got an over limit, but did he know that he intentionally did that? No. He saw those 2 ducks fall out of the sky at the same time with one shot. When he approaches them, does he lie about it or does he come clean? So those are the types of things that, I guess I classify poachers as violators, but not intentional violators. Does that make sense to you, Ben?
What? Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. What? Okay, intentional violators. What's going on? What's some themes, some common themes and personalities that you notice with the intentional poachers? What makes them tick? What makes them a poacher?
Good question. Some of it's growing up in a poaching family. Grandpa poached, dad poached. So, that's why I poach, because everybody else has done it. Some of it's greed. If you remember, and maybe you still have them in your area, the deer pools, to get that biggest deer, and there was thousands of dollars or a rifle involved. We had intentional guys going out there and cheating, whether it was baiting, whether it was night hunting, trying to get that biggest deer, any means necessary. It wasn't a fair play because they wanted that gun or they wanted that money. So anytime that money comes into anything wildlife, trouble exists. I don't want to put down guides or anything like that, but there's a lot of guide problems because the guide is out to make his clients happy and to move on to the next clients. And if he's not focused on the resource and, why he's out there, he is focusing on money and he's not caring. So he's probably going to intentionally violate because it's easier. Do we throw out the corn here, or do we do this because I'm going to move these on, because I want to get these guys their ducks and move on to the next people so I can get them their ducks, or, when it goes on with moose and deer. And when money comes into it, that has a tendency to drive the illegalness of things. And that's worldwide. You see it in Africa with ivory, you see it with gallbladders. It's just when money, you see it with elvers too. When money gets involved, then cheating or taking shortcuts start. And when they get away with the first shortcuts, it goes easier to the second shortcuts, and it's a money driven thing. And if money is what drives you, then there may be a problem. If you're out there for the resource and you're out there for the right reasons, you're out there to bring other people that probably have a little limited experience in hunting, or they have limited access to hunting, and you're guiding them in there for a good quality hunt, and that's what you want to do, and that's you love doing it because you love being out there and you love being part of that thing, then you're probably a really good guide. But if you're out there to make a buck and to turn it around and to treat, get the next client out there to make another buck, you're probably not the best guide. So I guess it's what drives you.
If I don't, when I'm talking to, and I talk to quite a few guides just here and there, and if they're not focusing on, if I don't hear something about the experience or something of that nature, if they're not focusing on the experience, if they're telling you all about, hey, limit this, limit that, we got this many birds, we got that many birds, and if I don't hear anything talking about experience or the stuff outside of the hunting, I'm usually a little turned off by that. And I don't go on a lot of guided hunts. I've been on maybe 3.
That's exactly what, the people that listen to your show should be listening if they do go on guided hunts. That's the kind of guide you want to go with. It talks about that quality hunt and talks about the experience. And, northern New Hampshire deer hunting is pretty sparse. So I try to make it out of the experience. It's not really about killing that deer. It's about spending the day in the woods, spending the day on the marsh and seeing things flying around, and, practice up a little before you go so you can hit something if it comes in, because I've seen some pretty poor shots. But you're right. If they're not talking about the experience and they're not selling an experience and that's all about bag limits or filling your bag, then yeah, you probably should call another guide till you hear that word, hey, I'm not out here. I can't guarantee you anything, but I will guarantee you have a good time and you'll have a great experience. That's what we should be selling. We want success too, but most of those guys that want that experience are successful. But that, whenever money seems to come involved, or, bragging rights, so to speak, that's when poaching happens, and we're never getting rid of it. We'd love to exterminate every little bit of it, but it's just those pieces of humanity that drive some people that we're always going to see it.
Yeah, and before we get to some of the bad guy stories, which I'm sure that's probably why everybody's tuning in right now, of course. You'd mentioned something earlier that kind of prompted an impromptu question here for me. The letter versus the spirit of the law, and where you kind of in the field are forced to make decisions of that nature. Can you kind of describe what it's like being on the game warden side?
Absolutely. And I can't speak for every game warden because personality comes in this. So experience comes in with this. Everybody knows when there's a new cop in town, right? The new kids out there stopping taillights, this, that, and the other thing. And as you get a little more age on you, you start to look for the quality stops and not the quantity, so to speak. So I think that there's a lot that goes into our decisions in the field, our personalities, our experience, and we bring those into it. So you may get a bad, not a bad game warden, but you may get an inexperienced game warden that throws the book at you right away. you may get the other guy that understands and can read a lot more of this into it than the young kid can. And, so that ends up being your experience. And sometimes it starts off with a bad experience. I've had guys point guns at me unintentionally. Well, unintentional or not, that sends me through the roof. I've grabbed barrels and taken them away from my leg. I've done all kinds of things. That starts a bad footing with me, Ben. I've already started, I'm already on my hackles are raised and I'm a little ticked off. So that starts a bad experience because I've already had one with a hunter. So in making those decisions, and some of them are easy to make, if I'm checking a duck hunter and he's got lead on him, that's an easy one for me, because especially, the older crowd seems to believe that lead is still better than anything, and they keep a few extra ones in their pockets or something like that. So that's easy for me. And over limit of ducks is easy for me. Those types of things are pretty black and white in my book. It's the guy that shoots, goes and shoots and has an over limit when I just watched him dump, 2 hens and he's got 2 hens in his bag, or, he would have just had one more, but that shotgun shell took out the other one. If I see that and I can understand that was an honest mistake, then yeah, I grab that duck and, or I come up to him, he's like, geez, I just shot and, I took 2 hens out and I had one. I didn't mean to kill them. And, you have to see that kind of thing though. That's the tough thing. And I always like doing surveillance, especially on duck hunters, because they sit in a blind, and with a spotting scope or a set of binoculars, you can watch and you can tell what kind of hunters they are, what kind of shots they are, the equipment they're using, and you can get right into it. So the type of hunter you're dealing with right away. I watch guys shoot ducks all day long, and they must have been running out of shells. They must have shot 2 boxes of shells while I watched them and never, ever hit a duck. And guess what? The ducks started landing, and they started sluicing them, right? That was their way to kill the ducks. And then they started killing them, and, that's whether you think it's unsportsmanlike or not, it's still legal. So there was no issue there, but that was the way it went that day. But making that decision in the field is totally up to the individual warden, and there's so many types of elements that come into it to make those decisions. So it's hard to sit back here and say on each violation what I would do, without coming into it, and what another warden would do might be totally different. And I, as a supervisor or lieutenant, I'd always support my guys. You guys made that decision, maybe, you should have thought of this or that, but whatever, I'm going to support you because I'm sure you had a reason to make those decisions. So, and I always worked with new guys to start off so that they understand there's a gray area. It's all not black and white, that honest mistakes are made, and sometimes the spirit of the law is better than the letter of the law. So that being spoken, there are other people out there that are very black and white. And I think that's in every role of life we see that. So, and it's more about personality, understanding, and learning, people. So that, if that answers your question, I mean, I kind of danced around with it, getting into particular.
No, that's good. Yeah, that's good. All right. So I always welcome the game warden to my blind, because I know that I have all my permits. I know that I'm not, doing anything illegal. There's always that little ghost or that little voice back there saying, yeah, but is everything good? Like, have you checked everything? I kind of wanted to talk about, how do we have a successful interaction with a game warden in the field as a hunter? Yeah, no, that's a good one. And the easy thing is, when you see a warden, unload your gun, unload it safely. That's, boy, is that nice, especially when you're in the blind, Ben, because the first thing, when I used to check, and I checked guns a little differently than everybody else did, because I'd have them unload their gun and I would load their gun up to see if they had a plug in it. And I, except for putting one in the chamber, I'd hand them back to the third round and say, hey, it's good. I didn't have a plug checker. I consistently did that because it had them unload their gun right away. I think that's a great thing
when checking. Do I see a lot of deer hunters do it? No. Should they? Not, it's pretty quick. If they can put down their gun and not unload it, that's fine. But definitely, in a blind or something, that's just a nice courtesy to see. And it puts me at ease because I've had so many issues of bad gun handling. Whether it's one individual or two, and especially if there's two or three in the blind, shotguns start going places, and you can almost tell the experiences of gun handling too. Some of those guys, break open, it's easy. Break it open, she's safe. The autoloaders, those guys take a little time, but it makes it safe for everybody. And it just sends me a message on a level that these guys know what they're doing because they saw the game warden. They unloaded their guns. So this is how we begin our check. And what a great way to start checking somebody is with an unloaded gun. On a rifle, move your bolt back. It's easier. It makes me feel more at ease too, because now I'm not watching the barrel all the time if you're holding it in your hands or you have a juvenile with you. I've had issues with juveniles and gun handling, and they're novice at it. So, dad, son, go put your gun over there, lay it down on the ground until we're done checking the game warden. So, and then that puts everybody at ease. You have both hands to work through your wallet to find your paperwork, to see your licenses, your stamps, and things like that. So, I think that's a good way. And I always start off being nice. I don't go right for the license, but everybody knows what I'm there for. So, usually they're already getting that out as we're small talking. So, and then I'm looking at bags, looking at what they have in their hands, and exactly, are they comfortable with me being there? And usually there's always a little bit of tension with the game warden there, regardless, unless you know him very well. There's always that little bit of tension, even though he's there to, he's your friend and he's there to help, and he's there to make sure everybody's on the same page. And when you have it, but there's always that little bit of tension, like you said, do I have everything? And how many times have I handed, a duck stamp back and said, hey, can you sign this for me? Here's my pen. Oh, geez. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, no, I get it. So that's probably the number one violation, I think, in my career as far as duck hunters went, sign your stamp. So they don't have to have it affixed, actually. A lot of people think they need it affixed, but a lot of collectors, will collect those stamps after and keep them. So they actually don't have to be affixed to the license, but they have to be signed. It's like an endorsement.
Yeah, I guess, I never thought about this too much, but, cops have a pretty dangerous job, but not every single person that a cop interacts with is armed, where a game warden, pretty much every time you interact with somebody, they're armed.
Absolutely. And, I have a friend that's the chief of police, and, he'd jump in my cruiser with me and we'd go check hunters. And he's like, Wayne, I just don't know how you do this. Everybody's got a gun. And I said, well, you get used to it, and you have to learn people. And you have to learn attitudes and personalities and the way they're talking to you, so you can interpret if this going to be a good interaction or a bad interaction. And 90% of the people game wardens deal with are good people. There are those 10% that are very bad people, and then guns are very much in play, and you take it a lot more serious. So, but yeah.
Okay, so we've unloaded our gun. And now we're digging through licenses and stuff. What other things can we, do to have a more positive reaction?
It depends how your dog is. If you got a friendly dog, that's great. If you got a Chesapeake Bay Retriever, you might want to, make sure they're leashed pretty good. So it's the only dog that ever bit me. She didn't actually clamp down. I was sneaking up on a duck blind watching, and she caught wind of me, and that dog came out of that blind heading, and I stood up and I started yelling game warden. And you should have seen this guy's face in the blind. He was screaming at the top of his lung, and the fear of God was in his face. And that dog was coming for me. And I don't know, I probably got 4 game wardens out before she came. And I put my arm up, and she put her mouth around my arm. She never clamped down. She had this look in her eye. We were like mid eyes, and we're staring at each other. And she never clamped down. And that guy is screaming as he's running, and he gets her, but she never put her teeth in me. But I'll tell you, that's the closest I've gotten bit by, sneaking up on a duck blind. And I don't know who was more scared. So the dog is probably another thing. If you got one of those Chessies that likes to bite people, you might want to leash them up or something. So labs are great dogs. I've never had any issues, but I know there are some of those labs that, might want to be. So good if you have a dog in the blind and it needs to be tied up when the game warden's there, that would be a great thing to do as well. But just cordial, get your paperwork out. Depending how long. I was checking duck hunters one time, and I bet 200 ducks landed right in his decoys. And he's there with his paperwork in his eyes. He's like, "Can I shoot those?" I'm like, "Go right ahead." So and he had to load back up, but they sat right there for him. And then he shot all 3 rounds, and he never touched one duck. All 200. It was a big flock. Got up and he never touched one. I was like, and I'm like, yeah, sometimes I bring good luck and sometimes I bring bad. So I brought it both in those cases.
Do you ever wait? Like you see, okay, hey, these guys are having some good shooting, fast action, but you're like, I can't just leave this. I got to go check them out. Is that ever?
I usually wait if they're having some good shoots. You want to sit there and watch them to make sure they don't overlimit. So if there's plenty of action, action for them is action for me, because I can sit there and watch all day guys shoot ducks. It's awesome. Just as much as they're having fun, I'm having fun watching them shoot them. So yeah, am I going to get bored if I'm sitting in the woods and they're not doing anything? Probably. But if there's a lot of action and there's a lot of ducks flying and a lot of ducks coming in, I'm sitting there till they're done. So and I'm counting their ducks, I'm making notes, I'm checking the guy in the reed camo with the funky little hat there. He's got 3 ducks, and try to identify them too. Whether they're mallards or whatever you're hunting, you're going to identify your ducks. So you want to know what they're shooting as individuals, because remember, you have an individual bag. It's not a group bag, which again, I think we've run into a lot of problems. I came upon, 8 guys hunting one time and there was a pile of ducks. And I'm like, so whose ducks are whose? And they're like, I'm like, yeah. Why don't we separate these out? And they weren't over their limits. They were still well within, shooting the limits, but they had a pile of ducks there. I'm like, so claim your ducks. So everybody claimed their ducks. I'm like, now keep your own piles. These are your individual ducks, and that's what you need. So that's what you need to stay. Just like fishing. It's not a group, creel limit. It's what you're supposed to catch. So when I'm watching fishermen, it's the same way. This guy's doing a really good job. He's a really good fisherman, and he catches more fish. Well, guess what? It's not a group thing. He's caught 10 fish. He's over the limit, by 5 in our state. So on trout. So the same with ducks. If one guy's a really good shot and slaying the ducks, and he's filling the bag for everybody else, again, can't do that. That's the bag for him as an individual, not as a group.
Yeah, and I obviously, sometimes it's hard to tell who shot what in certain situations, but at least when you're out retrieving, that's when the conversation needs to be hey, this was in my lane. Yeah, but I shot at that one too. Okay. I'm pretty sure you got this one. At least when they get back to the blind, you need to have those sorted out. Would you say that that's fair?
That's very fair. Nope. And absolutely. I remember, when I was in Oregon, went goose hunting for the first time and dropped one out, and the only one fell, and I was like, did anybody else shoot at that goose? And they're like, nope. So, because I was like, did I really hit that?
That's funny.
So yeah, you're right. You need to have that conversation, and you need to know who shot what. But yeah, when you're shooting and there's a bunch of guys shooting at a bunch of geese or ducks, you claim them, and hey, was I shooting that duck? Were you shooting that duck? It fell, it's dead. So, and I'm sure sometimes they get leveled out with the bags, which I think is fine, because, that happens. You can't, if one guy, is done and he's sitting there and the other guy's shooting, that's another story. But yeah, it can be very difficult at times.
You shoot the wrong duck. It's teal season and you shoot a wood duck. What do you do?
Yeah, best to report yourself. That's the best thing to do. So, and if you report yourself, I'll never say 100%, but I have never, held that against somebody. I'll be like, thank you. I'll take the duck, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
So when you don't report yourself and you get that caught in your bag, that's another thing.
Right.
So,
right.
And then time from maybe you're leaving to when you can make it to a phone or something, and you do have it in your bag. That can be an issue too. So, and I've had that happen with spruce grouse. Guy coming out from hunting, sees us. We're We're kind of we're checking, we're talking about everybody that's coming out. And he's like, yeah, I'm looking for you guys. And I'm like, why? I shot a spruce grouse by accident. The dog flushed him, and, I just pulled up and shot him, and here's a spruce grouse. And in New Hampshire, spruce grouse is protected. So, he had it in his bag. He was coming out. So when he saw us, he stopped, handed us a spruce grouse. So I took it at face value and said, thank you a lot. I wrote him a warning. He knew he wasn't supposed to shoot a spruce grouse, so here's your warning for shooting a spruce grouse. So, and that was the end of it. So, and I think for most people, that's the end of it. If you come clean right away, you're leaving the blind. You got this duck, and you were going to report it, and here's the warden coming up to you. Hey, warden, I know you're probably not going to believe this, but I got a duck that I shouldn't have. I shot it by accident. I was going to call you, and here you are. So, that's going to be one of those judgment calls in the field. But for people to come right out and say that, yeah, maybe they saw the warden in the field and they think, I'm going to be caught anyways. But, some of us weigh it and say, geez, that could be the truth because it's happened to me before. So the problem is we get lied to a lot. I mean, it's hard to believe, Ben, but wardens get lied to a lot, and then we get calloused. We start believing everybody lies to us. We, think our kids lie to us. We think our wife lies to us, So we have to take a step back every time and say, hey, wait a second, not everybody lies. And I'll tell you that the guys that have gotten a break from me is usually the guys that tell the truth as much as I can. When they come clean and say, yep, this happened, man, I'm going to treat them the best I can, because that doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And what happens to those, the game that you guys have to confiscate? What ends up happening? It goes to collection, like you have to collect it for a certain amount of time, right?
Exactly. It has to go through the court procedures. Ducks, they go into a freezer usually, and then, I would take them to court. When I had days of court, federal court, when I was a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuge officer out in Oregon and Washington at Umatilla Refuges, I took my coolers to court for my overlimits, and you brought the coolers into court, which was kind of funny. But I'll tell you, I had the best experience out there in court because I brought my coolers in, and I had a great, assistant U.S. attorney, and he was all into wildlife cases and everything. So he prosecuted all my cases. The other U.S. attorney was a female, and she didn't really get the whole thing. So she negotiated all of my other cases out. So, which didn't have some of the best outcomes. I wasn't real happy. But this U.S. attorney brought me in, and I started off with an overlimit of ducks, and the judge. It was his last time he was sitting as a judge. And the first question he asked those guys, he goes, were they all greenheads, or do you have some hens too? And when he said greenheads, I'm like, this judge knows what he's talking about. He's a duck hunter. So, and they were like, no, Your Honor, we have hens too. And he's like, and he says to me, he's like, let me tell you, boys, this judge stuff is a hobby for me. I'm a professional duck hunter, and I take offense to and he just chews them out and finds them guilty. And I'm like, this is awesome. And the next case I had was a lead case. And he starts going off how much he hates steel shot, and how it wounds ducks and this and that. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to lose this case. And at the end of him standing on his soapbox, he's like, but I'm an officer of the court, and I have to uphold the law. So I got to find you guys guilty, even though I don't agree with it, and puts his gavel down. And I was like, wow, that was probably the best fish and wildlife judge I've ever had. I'm very sorry it was his last day, but I'm glad I get to experience that. So, but those animals get brought into court. Sometimes we process them, like deer. We'll process them and freeze them so we don't lose the meat. And once the case is resolved, we can donate that to whether a soup kitchen or needy families or something like that. Ducks that doesn't happen with ducks. They go in the freezer and they get freezer burnt by the time court goes around, and they get thrown out, unfortunately. So that's a resource loss, but it's just because we can't process those efficiently. And then to give, something to a soup kitchen after that would just, it's freezer burn. It's bad probably by the time it rolls around to court. So, but we can do with big game animals. We can process them in some jurisdictions. Other jurisdictions, they want the whole carcass preserved. In that case, guess what? That gets thrown out too, because the whole carcass frozen in a freezer, time for court. Again, it's freezer burn. It's junk. It's no good to anybody, except maybe for coyote bait. but we usually end up dumping those. But if we can, preserve the meat, we usually, we have a little fun at the fishing game, at least in New Hampshire. We butcher it, everything gets done. And sometimes we recoup that in the cost of the case. We usually throw the cost of butchering in with the fines, and then we let the hunters know, hey, this is all going to be donated after, so it doesn't go to waste. And even the guys that violate, I think, appreciate that doesn't get thrown out. I wish we could do it with small game too, but it's just not effective or efficient, so to speak. Not
Efficient, yeah.
Yeah, efficient. So, but has to go to court so they can see the evidence.
So before we talk a little bit about your time in Oregon, do you think it would be best to give a brief overview of your career, kind of where you've been, and then we can come back to Oregon?
Yeah, no, that's fair. My career kind of starts, when I was a kid, just wanting to be a game warden. I always talk about, in my first podcast, I talk about the experience I had in the woods hunting with my father, grouse hunting, and turning around and seeing a game warden in the woods and seeing that big cowboy hat on his head, a Stetson. And, from that point on, wanting to be that cowboy in the woods, that guy that, just shows up out of the middle of nowhere and is just mysterious and, the protector of the animals in the forest type thing. So I kind of had that in my head. So I went to I actually rode around with the local game warden, Sergeant Robert Bryant. I ended up being a lieutenant before he retired, but that he was a sergeant for as long as I knew him. And I did ride-alongs constantly. So, with all hunting seasons, I'd jump in with him, and it was fun. It was fun going with him to check hunters, make cases. When I was getting ready to graduate high school, he brought some guys that had just been hired over to the house, and they had gone to the State University of New York at Cobleskill. And he thought that sounded like a really good college. These guys, were pretty squared away, and he was impressed with their schooling and sounded like a good thing. So that's where I went. So I got an associate's degree from the State University of New York at Cobleskill, which is just outside of Albany, between Binghamton and Albany, right there. So, and after I got that, I worked for the rangers in the DEC Rangers, Department of Environmental Conservation, out of New Paltz. So I was a backcountry ranger in the Catskill Mountains. So that summer I got to hike around and kind of do some law enforcement, more educational type stuff of law enforcement. If there was any action, needed to be taken, I would call a ranger in. But ranger was a pretty cool job. So I went over to the National Park Service. I was a seasonal, and I started training in Sylvan, North Carolina. They have a seasonal national park ranger school. Back then it was 10 weeks long, and some outstanding training. I've been through a lot. In my 23 years, I've had a lot of training, and some of the best training I think I got was from Sylvan, North Carolina. They brought some outstanding instructors in, and they just did a really good job to give us a certification so we could be a seasonal law enforcement officer for the National Park Service. So from there, I went up to New River Gorge, West Virginia. I was a whitewater ranger there. I ran the New River. I ran the Gauley River, which is one of the top 10 navigable bodies of water in the world. Did some paddling there. Learned how to kayak. Did a lot of search and rescue, high angle rescue in New River Gorge. It's a big rock climbing area. We did whitewater rescues all the time. I got to whitewater raft all the time. Would throw out me and another guy. Jay Connerly would throw a kayak in the back, and one of us would paddle the raft, and the other one would paddle the kayak, and we'd go down through rapids and switch on and off. And I just learned so much and had so much fun that summer. And we did a lot of rescues, did a lot of law enforcement, and did a lot of education, which was really cool. But I kept moving on because I just wanted to soak up all that experience. My next location was the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore in Lake Superior. And I got to run a 25-foot whaler and experience Lake Superior, which is really, that should be one of the top navigable bodies of water in the world, because that's the most scared I've ever been in a boat. Because we had some serious waves that would swallow up that 25-foot whaler I couldn't see in or out of, and I'd have to navigate through that to sometimes to get people off islands and things like that. And again, the Park Service came up with these training programs for the boats that was just, I'm probably the best. I'm a great boat operator. Well, I shouldn't say a great boat operator, because, as long as you use it, you keep those skills. back then I was a very good boat operator, and I was very happy to get those skills. And even when I came on with New Hampshire Fish and Game, I was very confident boat operator. To this day, well, when I was a lieutenant, I'd go down to the seacoast and I'd drive the big boats because I like driving, so I didn't get seasick. But anyways, I just, the experiences I got on the Apostle Islands Nationals, Apostle Islands in Lake Superior were just priceless. But I did leave those again and went to Astig Island National Seashore, where again I used my boat skills down there. I was able to bring their wheeler up to snuff and do a lot of beach patrol, a lot of stuff that I never had done before, DWIs, a lot of traffic, a lot of just breaking into cars and stuff because people would lock their cars in on the beach, plus all the sea life. We had whales, we had seals that would come up on the shore, Sitka deer on the island. Now they hunt whitetail. They didn't before. And boy, you could go up the island with a spotlight at night, and I'll tell you what, you'd see 14-point bucks on a regular basis. I was like, this place is crazy with deer. It was just phenomenal.
Now this is not a typical game warden career, is it? I feel like you're talking about all these different places and all these different experiences, and I feel like the one or two game wardens I know, I've been in Kansas and operating in Kansas for 13 years, or Nebraska for 13 years. Switched a zone or two or something like that.
Yeah,
but this is
I would agree, and I think you're right. A lot of the game wardens that I know are probably very similar to that, and yeah, because I was trying to get experience to be a game warden. The best avenue I thought was to do that seasonal law enforcement with the National Park Service and get that experience. So every time it was time to move a park for a season, I'd look and see what kind of experiences that I could gain to bring myself to the table so people would, I would be noticed. Because back then, 23 years ago, it was tough being a game warden. When that job opened up, there was thousands of people applying, and it was a very, very, very competitive job to get. So I was trying with every job to up myself, the boat operations, the water experience. I was Rescue 3 certified as far as swiftwater rescue was there. Just the skill set that I was able to bring. I got scuba certified when I was in college. So I was an EMT when I was in New York. I went to EMT class, so I grabbed that EMT, which also helped me in the National Park Service move around, because that EMT jumped out at them every time, because it's not every seasonal park ranger that holds an EMT certification. So that helped too. But that is, I was building my resume, so to speak, to get this job. So yeah, I traveled, and thank God I did, because it was just an awesome experience as in my 20s, banging around the country, packing up every 5 to 6 months and moving somewhere else, which brought me to the Umatilla refuges, because park ranger work is great in the summer, and there's a lot of it in the summer. When it comes to the winter, guess what? There's very few seasonal park ranger jobs. I used to call the Virgin Islands on a regular basis. That guy's probably glad I got a full-time job, because I used to call him like once or twice a month looking for a park ranger job during the winter down there. So that would have been a cool experience too. And I actually got called by Alaska, but I had already accepted the job in West Virginia. So I had to Wrangell St. Elias called me, and I wanted to go to Alaska, and the worst way to be a park ranger. And I was like, nope, I've already took a job. I already said yes to them. So I'm going to have to keep my word and go to West Virginia. But my first winter job was, or fall winter job was Umatilla Refuges in Washington, Oregon. And it's right on the Columbia River. And this is where I became a duck cop. And, I'll tell you, as far as hunting goes, it's probably the coolest law enforcement you can do is waterfowl. There's lots of action. There's violations, numerous in some cases. There's a lot of people, a lot of interaction. It was awesome. I got up, early in the morning. I'd be out, pre-dawn most of the time, trying to find some duck hunters to set up on. And I was home usually by 2, and I'd grab my roommate's dog and we'd go out and hunt pheasants till sunset, because that's on the refuge. You have to stop hunting on sunset, even, upland game. So that last hour was just awesome with the hunting pheasants. So, but yeah, so that's where I became a duck cop, just because I was looking for winter work, and Assateague Island actually has a refuge there, Chincoteague National Wildlife Refuge. So I was able to make some contacts there. A guy that had been at Umatilla Refuges the year before that wasn't going to take the job again, referred me. And that's the reason I got the job out there, and gave me that winter position. So I packed up my bags and drove across the country to work there. And, at first it wasn't very glamorous. I lived in a tool shed to start. Because they were supposed to have housing, but the trailer that I was going to live in, no, they hadn't vacated yet. So there was some downtime. There was like a month of downtime. So I lived in this tool shed, and I'd walk across the street, across the compound to the maintenance facility where there was a shower. So I'd shower there. But, back in those days, I wasn't living on bread and water. So, I was a young kid moving around, just doing these seasonal jobs and getting this experience. And so it didn't take much for me. My friend that drove out with me couldn't believe I was going to live in a tool shed. But I'm like, they're not charging me anything for the tool shed. So that was good with me.
Yeah. What's the craziest waterfowl story you got?
Probably almost getting shot by a waterfowler unintentionally. I had crawled up, and I got a good vantage point, and I was sitting there. They had quite a few ducks flying in. So thank goodness I was laying in the reeds on my belly, and I had a log. I was propped up against the log, and I had my binoculars sitting on the log. And, they were shooting. It was getting towards, I guess, 11-ish. So there wasn't a whole lot flying. And all of a sudden, this one drake mallard comes, and he lands right in front of me, probably 10 feet away. And those guys, next thing I know, I got barrels blazing. I watched them like train. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So I curled up behind that log as the shot was going through the reeds above me, and never got shot. So, but and then they never hit the duck either. The duck took off quacking, whack, 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 off it goes. And I'm like, geez, bro, and it was a good poke. I mean, it was probably 60 yards, but they all opened up on him. And thank goodness I had that log that I was, just propped up my binoculars on, and were watching. So, but those guys unintentionally, wasn't their fault really, because they didn't know I was there, nor should I have been there. But what are the odds of that duck?
Yeah, how'd that conversation go?
Yeah, I didn't even let him know it happened, because I wasn't going to let him.
No,
I weaseled my way out.
They don't know.
They don't know. I went all the way right around, and again, thank goodness I was safe. I didn't take any BBs, but I just I didn't really want them to know that they just blasted away at the game warden either, because I think that would have hurt my pride a little too. So, but
Sure.
They hadn't done anything wrong all day. I'd been watching them for a while, so it was just getting to that point where I think they were like 1 or 2 ducks from their limit. So I was hanging and waiting to see if they were going to fill it. So yeah, that was probably the most unnerving thing I had happen there. It was a cool place because we get to see all kinds of ducks and identification. I mean, waterfowl hunters know that's key. And I get to identify them in hand, which is pretty awesome because, I don't have to look at what they're flying. That's your job. My job, I get it in the hand. Now I got it. So every now and then I run into something I didn't know. It wasn't common. I'd bring it up. I'm like, yeah, I got to check this duck out. It looks a little funny. I'd bring it up to the truck and I'd get my book out, flip through it. I'm like, oh, yeah. Okay.
My uncle has a great story about that. I can't remember what it was. It might have been a wood duck teal situation, but the game warden came up to him, and my uncle said, well, geez, how am I supposed, there was 40 teal. How was I supposed to identify this one particular, I can't remember what they were supposed to be discriminating against. And he goes, well, I don't know. You tell me, Mr. Duck Hunter. And he carries that with him almost as a little bit of he's like, yeah, game warden got me good on that one. So.
Yeah, and just experiencing the Columbia River with 300,000 mallards rafted off of the refuge was just, intense for a hunter, intense for a game warden, just to see that every day. The eagles flying over looking for cripples.
What years was this?
Back in the early 90s. So I graduated, yeah, so it would have been probably 94. Because I came on with Fishing Game in 95, and I would have gone back there in a heartbeat if I hadn't get the game warden job. So, because that was probably the park ranger stuff was really good too. It was all really good those years. I have very fond memories of, whether it's whitewater rafting in West Virginia or working duck hunters in Umatilla refuges. So, but that probably gave me the experience I needed to be a game warden. Eastern game wardens, at least in New Hampshire, we have some ducks, but we don't have anything like out there. I tried to go duck hunting here and I got bored silly. I went back to bow hunting deer because, just after you west or in your country, you actually expect to see ducks, and our flyway just isn't even close to compares to what your flyway is. So it's sad. you got to work really, really hard for your ducks here compared to anywhere else.
And so, okay, and then you become a game warden, and I want to ask you a couple, stories, or a couple questions about your time as a game warden that I'm sure you've told these stories around a campfire multiple times. And hopefully if there's any future, game wardens listening to this, then, it's good for them. And, obviously, hopefully to get a little bit of entertainment, for the rest of us. Kind of want to talk about, what's the baddest guy? You were talking about bad guys. And, what was the baddest guy doing for you?
I mean, the baddest guy, I probably didn't catch. That's half the problem. I got close a couple times, but and I hate talking about the guys I didn't catch, but there are certainly ones out there, and every game warden knows who his clientele is. And believe me, sometimes my lieutenant would pull me back because, as a young warden, could be ferocious. And, I had screaming matches and I knew I was right. And to this day, I know I was right. So, when you talk about bad, are you talking about drug dealer bad? You're talking about killing our resources bad? There's been certainly some very bad people. One is dead now after he killed 4 people, shot me, and shot a few other, law enforcement officers. But that incident, he ended up dead. So he was probably the baddest one I encountered, but it wasn't really a fishing game issue. It was responding to something I didn't know about. And I ended up seeing him and pursuing him into the state of Vermont, and he ambushed me. So that's probably the baddest guy that I was trying to catch. And again, I didn't catch. I got shot in the line of duty doing it. So, that. But then I think about some of the poachers. One that I caught, and I talk about it in my best cases, my second podcast. And, these and it was funny, Ben, because you asked me what a backyard poacher was, or a backyard hunter.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, these backyard guys are so hard to detect if you don't know about them. And because they don't have that venue to move, they go right out their back door, whether they have a pile of bait, and a motion light, or whether they, walk to a tree stand that's, just behind their house. You don't know they're out there hunting. You don't know what times they're hunting. And the only reason you start to suspect things is maybe some neighbors, or maybe, they're consistently killing big animals. And I've never checked them. I don't know where they're hunting. You start getting suspicious yourself, because if you kill a big buck year after year after year, you're either very good or you're cheating. So that's my job, to figure out whether you're very good or you're cheating. So, and there are some very, very good hunters out there that are very successful all the time. And there are some cheating people out there. So, and that's what a game warden does. So I think, the guy that was killing those deer consistently, and I investigated it, and I remember knocking on that door and him opening the door, and I could smell the deer, and we had a good relationship. He knew me, I knew him. And eventually I got that deer, and I prosecuted him for night hunting. I don't know how many times he did that, but it was a lot. And I know I didn't break him because he went and bought a crossbow so no one would hear the shots anymore. So I feel like he was a bad poacher because he probably destroyed our resource like nobody else has in that neighborhood ever, and probably continued to do it just, again, out the back door and very, very hard, to catch. So, bad guys, I guess they're, dealt with drug dealers when you're doing search warrants on houses that people are killing a lot of animals. It interacts with drugs sometimes. So we've had some cases that we've run into some serious drugs, and usually when we do our warrants and stuff, state police or the local police are involved. So it's really nice because then they can take all the drug stuff and we get all the game violations. So and doing a warrant can be very hairy too, because we always did knock warrants. I never did a no knock warrant. So we knocked and usually told them why we were there and got that out. But, when you go into somebody's house to search it, it's not a pleasant experience for them at all. So you got to watch these people. You got to keep an eye on these people. You got to keep everybody safe because, again, these are people that are pretty unsavory type of people that you got to keep an eye on just in case something snaps in them and they go for a gun, or they decide it's this time, or they're on their drugs or they need to be on their drugs and they can't be on their drugs because you're there and they're strung out. So, specific stories, I talk about that one case, especially, I just love that I smelled the deer. And that comes from, the kid that never hunted growing up wouldn't ever know the smell of a deer. When he opened that door and, the smell of the deer, and then he was trying to hide his hands from me, and he had a nice sheath on that was empty. So those are things, ding, 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 ding in my head. I'm like, I smell the deer. So, and he invites me into his house, Ben. He invites me, come on in, Wayne, come on in, like we're best buds. So, and he goes right to the bathroom and scrubs and scrubs and scrubs his hand, and his wife can't talk. She's sitting on the couch and she's blah, 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 blah. She can't even talk because I'm there. So, in the first place, I'm like, hey, I got a report of a shot fired up here. He's like, oh, I haven't heard a thing. I said, well, I'd like to look around anyways. And he's like, okay. And he said, where do you want to look around? I said, your garage. Oh, I can't do that. I want to, I don't want you to know, I don't want you to get confused between legal deer and illegal deer. And I looked at him, I'm like, isn't that my job? Oh yeah, I know, but I can't let you do that. So my lieutenant was actually waiting down at the bottom of the hill, and I grabbed the microphone so he could hear, because I said I got to get a flashlight too, because he was going to let me look around the house. And I called my lieutenant. I said, yeah, we're going to need to do a search warrant here. And I let the guy hear that too. So, and as we're walking around the house, I knew he had a bait pile behind the house, and I put the flashlight down. I'm like, hey, there's blood right here. He goes, oh yeah, my son shot a deer the other week, which he did too. So I reached down and I touched the drag mark, and I'm like, this is fresh blood. And then there's blood dripping off my hands, with a flashlight on it. And he's like, you got me. It's in the garage, So I went from there. And then, again, if you want more details, you got to listen to my second podcast, My Best Cases, because these are my best cases and I love them dearly, because I went from there loading that deer in the back of my truck, and we were supposed to run a decoy that night. So my lieutenant's like, you still want to run a decoy? I'm like, absolutely. Well, I had some places picked out, and he's like, you want to get so-and-so, don't you? I'm like, absolutely. Because I was putting it in their haunts, because that's what a game warden should know, is where these poachers are operating and how they're operating. Whether they're baiting ducks and shooting ducks over bait, or whether they're baiting deer, or whether they're night hunting. It's our jobs to figure out what the bad guys are doing. And like I said, sometimes we can call them by name, sometimes we don't. But we should have an idea where people are operating in our areas and where they're doing the bad stuff. And it coordinates with the population of animals. If it's a high population here, you might get them there. So if we put a decoy out, and these guys came down 2:00 in the morning, both drunk as skunks, and shot it, and it was great. And I had information that they had a contest going on who could poach the most deer that year among this group of guys that I caught 2 of them. So whether that was true or not, I haven't been able to confirm it yet, but one of the guys that was in that group, I'm going to call him a reformed poacher. He's one of those guys I never caught that, I saw at one point, and we had a little chat, and I'm like, what about this? And what about that? And Several times I was really close to catching him, but I never caught him. And the nice thing is, when he had a son, he didn't want his son to grow up the way he did. So he started doing it the right way, and he stopped poaching, and now we can have these conversations. And, I call him my reformed poacher. And but he tells me all the things that were going on, and I still haven't asked him about that, because he was right in the middle of that group too, whether there was actually a contest. But I'm pretty sure there was a contest, and these guys were out.
What blows my mind is, I listened to, and I don't know if you've listened to it, and I'm sure you're definitely familiar with it. Gosh, I can't remember the guy's name right now, but they call him the Prince of Poaching.
Yes.
That was poaching all them big deer in very, very crazy manners on the King Ranch down there in Texas, I think near Brownsville. Right. But literally getting, amphibious inserts onto the beach and things of that nature. What kind of blew my mind is that there's this little ring. They were running in these little rungs, the outlaw rings. I don't understand how that exists when you're doing stuff like that, because usually, someone once told me, hey, if you're gonna don't do anything illegal, don't do anything wrong, but if you do, don't tell anyone, and because that's how you get caught, right?
It totally is. Yep.
And how do they go around operating like that?
They do. And that's absolutely. And I don't know how they do it either, but it's kind of that click thing that, again, tell your friends, hey, I just shot this last night or that. And then that guy's got to go out and do one better. So, whether they grew up doing it or whether they acclimated to it because they're trying to get the biggest and the best, you're right. They gravitate towards each other. And it's usually a group of friends that probably have grown up together and have grown up in that type of violating themes. So, or guys that really want to get it. I got to cheat to do it. So because I can't do it legally. Now, whether you're not allowed on that ranch, so I got to cheat to do it. Whether you're, I got to cheat to do it because I don't have the skill set to do it the right way, or I'm lazy, which is most of these guys' thing when they're driving around and shooting things or shooting out their back door. But, and technology's changing too. I mean, we have infrared sensors that are coming down in prices, and the way game wardens do business is changing, and the way poachers are doing business is changing. So it's really different. So like you said, that guy who, put him amphibious, inserted himself amphibiously and stuff, he's thinking another way. We're thinking on how to catch him. He's thinking on how to kill this thing, no matter what it takes. Laws out the window. This is what I got to do, and this is, how I'm going to do it without laws, without thinking about laws. So, and that's how the poacher thinks. And then it's the bragging rights, because if you shoot this stuff and you can't talk about it, what good has it been? It's the guy that shoots stuff and maybe needs to fill his freezer and doesn't care what he shoots and throws it in the freezer and done. We'll probably never catch him because he's not going to tell another soul in the world. So, and then you never hear about it. The guy that drags it in his backyard, skins it out, butchers it, throws it in his freezer. If no one runs across him, we're probably not going to catch him because he's not going to brag about shooting a bunch of does and skippers to fill his freezer. If that's in what we're doing. In this day and age, there's no reason to fill your, I always hear the old stories, just coming back from World War II and stuff. There wasn't a lot of meat, and, there was a lot of poaching going on. And the warden used to say, hey, you've got enough deer this year to feed the family. So, stop poaching. So I hear those, and I guess that did exist back then, as they were literally trying to feed their families with wild game because they just came back from the war and the farms weren't being run the way they were because all the men were off. But this day and age, I've got roadkill. I've got roadkill lists. There's no need to go out and illegally kill something to fill your freezer, because I can fill your freezer if you want it filled, because I have a roadkill list, and if you want to be on it, and here's, deer gets hit here, they call you up, you go get it, you butcher it, and it's in your freezer. So it's just not, some of the guys that worked for me, are like, why'd you give that deer to him? He's a poacher. I'm like, well, if his freezer full, he can't throw another deer in it, can he? So, those types of things. It's just the way we operate today compared to what we did 40 years ago is very, very different.
Yeah. Jeez. So I got just a couple more questions here. I really do want to ask you. There's something that still has you scratching your head today from your career.
Scratching my head.
What is it?
Oh, there's so many guys that I probably didn't catch that I should have. And the nice thing is some of these new guys coming in are catching guys that I chased for a while. And because they look at it a different way and they go about it a different way, they're catching them. It's pretty neat. Glenn Lucas worked for me, and he made a case last year, a shining case. Well, it was it's a motion sensor light on a bait pile they put about 300 feet away from the house. So when the deer comes up, the motion sensor light comes on, and he had a deer shot off. He can't put it that it was after dark, so he charged him with shining. And I guess I never thought of it that way, but if you look at the law, he is illuminating wildlife, because he's doing it from his house with a motion sensor light, that's 300 feet away on a bait pile. That's a different way to look at it. And I never did. My predecessors never did. And when you look at the law, I'm like, why didn't I think of that? And it's infuriating, that I didn't look at it that way. I like new guys, and I like them to look at it a different perspective. I've got some cases that, I would have liked to run with. My lieutenant told me to back off when, I was ready to get an excavator and dig up a bear. And I to this day, I know it was illegal. I know I could have charged him. Would I have won it in court? Maybe not, but it would have felt a lot better.
Re-explain that. What'd you say? And what was he doing?
He shot a bear illegally. Now, he had a preseason bait that I didn't find till after, but he tells me the story. So I'm like, so I bring him back. I'm like, where'd you shoot the bear? He's like, oh, it was coming. It was a sand pit, mind you. It was coming up over that bank, and I shot it over there. I'm like, really? I'm like, where were you standing? So he's like, over here. So he walks over there and shows me. I was standing right here behind this dirt pile, and the bear came up over there, and I shot it. I said, geez, how long did you stand here for? He goes, oh, probably 2 hours, I bet. I said, really? I said, and that was last night? He's like, yep, last night. I said, has it rained? Did it rain last night? He's like, no, it didn't rain. I said, then why are your footprints the only footprints down there? There's no other footprints besides yours and me walking up here. So I would imagine standing there and walking those, you would have had footprints. Well, he looks down, he looks around, and then he loses it. And he just starts swearing and yelling at me because I had come to the conclusion, A, he was lying, and B, that was a bunch of crap. Well, he had shot that bear that night, and he had buried it in that sand pit with an excavator. So all my evidence is buried. So I wanted to get an excavator and dig it all up. So my lieutenant told me no. And I'm like, why not? And he was, nope, we can't do that. We can't do that. And to this day, that kind of thing grates on me, because I think if I had a new guy do that, I would have been like, absolutely, I'll run the excavator, because, so, but it was just, did I have enough then probably to charge him? No. Could I have got that bear, dug it up, and who knows if it was even there? A week later, I found his illegal bait pile. So, could I prove it that it was preseason baited? No, I couldn't, because it was during the season that I found it. Did I check it year after year after year after year after that? Absolutely. Did he ever preseason baited again? No. I created quite a stir because I went from house to house to house, and I canvassed people. And I got a guy that told me he heard shots at 9:00 that night. So I started using that. Well, that guy got ostracized out of the whole community for talking to the game warden and telling him that. And there was actually, him and his neighbor got in and mixed it up. And he actually the guy that gave me the information got arrested because him and his neighbor got in an argument over giving me information, and he swung and hit his neighbor. So he got arrested for assault. So, it was quite the stir over a case that I didn't make. but I kept prodding and prodding and prodding. So I actually sent wardens, because one of the guys was from Kentucky that was involved in this case. So I sent wardens to his house to do an interview down there as well, because I just didn't want to let it go. So yeah, that one's still burning in me, Ben. So he got away. I think I would have had enough to charge him, but I was a fairly new officer, and I was full of piss and vinegar. So sometimes the lieutenant that sits back and looks at it from a different angle probably, can make a better call. I'm not going to say it was a bad call, because I hate to, do the Monday morning quarterback thing, but yeah,
Right.
yeah, burns. Don't like losing. Most of your game wardens don't like losing, so that's why we try to get the best case we can in order to prove it in a court of law. Yeah, I told a guy once that I've never seized a house before, but I was going to try like heck. So, and I really planned on trying to seize his house. He had shot a deer illegally. It was using, again, the backyard method, the motion light from his house. I got him to. During the interview, I said, you know what? I've never taken a house before, but I'm going to try like heck to take this house. And I think he knew I was serious. The truck was coming with me. That was for sure. If things didn't change around, the deer was coming with me. But I've never taken a house before. But I'm going to try. It was used in the taking of this deer, and the law says that I can take the implements of the use, whether it's the vehicle, the knife, the firearm, the light. Well, the light came from the house, and I was like, you know what? I've never done it, but I'm going to try. And I think that switched him around. He's like, this guy's crazy. He's going to try to take my house because I shot a deer, And I absolutely was going to try it.
That's wow.
I didn't have to. He came to his milk. We got a night hunting case out of it. So I keep describing those backyard things. I've had quite a few of those in my career, and I think the guys in the future are going to have quite a few more of these backyard incidents, because that's where a lot of the poaching is going on, is right in people's backyards.
So, excluding obviously the time where you were shot in the line of duty, that's your story to tell, and that is in no way, shape, or form a respectful question to ask. What's, I asked you before, what's your head scratcher, but what's one of your heart pumpers? Like, whew, man, that was intense / crazy. And I'm glad to be here now,
I should have had these before, and then I could have thought about it a little more.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, that's quite all right. New Hampshire has search and rescue too, so there is some heart pounding incidents. And I think of a search and rescue. We were a mission we're on, and again, you can hear this in the Colonel and I. It's like number 3 of my podcast. I talk about this, and Mount Washington is the highest peak in the Northeast, 6,280 feet. Lots of search and rescue missions. We were looking for a woman. Chaput was her name. Her last name was Chaput. She was from Canada. We found her Thanksgiving Day, and I forget the year. But she was actually murdered too. So that's another part of the story. But the night we were looking for her, it was Thanksgiving night that me and the Colonel were out, and we were on top of Mount Washington, and it was snowing, and it was blowing, and we were just getting GPSs, and he was running the GPS we had, and I didn't even believe in a GPS. I was like, what the heck? It was getting nasty. It was getting cold. You could, we were the cairns that we navigate with when you lose a tree line. They pile these rocks up to make a point, and they're called cairns. So that's how you navigate. So I would stay at one of these cairns as he would go out and look for the next cairn, so we could see each other's flashlight, and he would flash me the flashlight when he found the next cairns, and I would move to him. So. And I was like, finally, I'm like, let's go back. This is crazy. We're going to die up here. It's cold. It's blowing. It's nasty. We can't hear a thing. And, I'm arguing with him. He's like, no, it's quicker to go this way. It's quicker to go this way. The GPS. And I'm like, yeah, I don't care about that stupid GPS. Let's go back the way we came. And I look back and all of our tracks where we had are blown away. You can't even see where we've walked within, 10 feet of us. Totally wiped out because of the wind and the snow. So I'm like, there goes that idea. So, so we made it off the Bootspur Trail and down the mountain. But I'll tell you what. That was one of those times where I'm like, this is really nasty, and are we going to make it off this mountain? That mountain has killed, and I don't even know what the total is because every year it adds. People don't take the eastern mountains real seriously compared to the western mountains. They're pretty short. Yeah. But where the White Mountains fall, there's like 3 different weather fronts that hit that spot, and if trees can't grow there, there's a reason for it. So. And, we have quite a few peaks that don't have trees on them. It's just rocks. And it takes the world's worst weather. The highest wind speed recorded has been on Mount Washington. So it's a very gnarly place. I've been on a rescue where we had to drive snowmobiles. We'd drive snowmobiles 10 feet and walk the 10 feet. And then so you didn't drive off the cliffs. So, and we would, just keep bumping, walk 10 feet, drive the snowmobiles 10 feet, walk 10 feet, drive the snowmobiles 10 feet, because that's all you couldn't see. We were in the clouds and it was just gnarly again. And you had a snowmobile this time, but you're trying to stay on the auto road, which goes to the top, and try to navigate, and it's pitch dark and the clouds are you're in the clouds. And that's probably some of the dangerous parts of, being a conservation officer in New Hampshire is the search and rescue with what we do in the extreme weather. Other guys have been in worse situations. As a lieutenant, I've put guys in really bad situations that I didn't really want to. I asked guys that saw a couple guys the other day. They were busting my chops. I had them sleep out overnight in a downpour because it would have took them 3 hours to get back to where they were the next morning to look for this guy. And I'm like, can you just hunker down and stay right there? Because 3 hours out, 3 hours back, to put them in the right search area. So they hunkered down and through a downpour stayed up there, which, it's as a supervisor, it really sucks when you're putting other people in harm's way. You don't sleep well to do that.
So no, it's especially when you can't make it right by being out there sleeping in the rain. So
yeah, no, it's been an exciting career in New Hampshire because of the search and rescue. Being in northern New Hampshire, it's pretty rural. It's still that backcountry type theme. Everybody knows who a game warden is, what a game warden does. There's been some times that the hair on the back of my neck stands up. I talk about when I was talking to Chris McCabe. I talk about the time I pulled my gun and I thought I was going to have to shoot this guy, and it was just I'll tell you, it's one of those sixth sense that it was just the weirdest thing. I just walked up to him. He had his trunk open. It was a big car, like a Lincoln or something. It was wasn't in the best shape or whatever. He had gas cans in it, but we're always stealthy as game wardens, and I'm standing right next to him, and I'm like, "What you doing?" And he snaps up. He looks at me, and he starts running for the car, and I'm like, "Hey, stop! Please stop!" And he dives in across the seat, and like he reaches for something, and he is reaching for something, and he spins in his seat. I already got my gun out, and I'm taking the slack out of it because I'm expecting to see a gun, and it's his wallet in his hand, and he's disabled, mentally disabled somehow, some way. He doesn't talk very clearly, and he wanted me to get his ID. And but my heart, I didn't even care at that time. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. The adrenaline had been sent through me so much, that I was like,
man,
and I can see where those mistakes are made because you have a split second to make that decision. And as that guy's spinning in the driver's seat, and I'm expecting to see a gun, and there's a wallet, and I'm like, what the heck? Why? But because whether he had issues hearing or was mentally, I don't think he was a bad guy. He was homeless. It looked like he was living out of his car, and he wanted me to see his ID. And to him, that was the most important thing, was to get that wallet to get to him. He wasn't listening to anything I said, and I surprised him.
Yeah.
So that takes a little. So, yeah,
Jeez.
yeah, those are the.
I'm glad that ended up okay for you there, Wayne.
And me too. What a horrible thing for an officer to do. Had I squeezed that trigger, and I would have lived with that the rest of my life. That's what a horrible thing. So, sometimes I think we're willing almost to take a bullet just to make sure we're in the right that much more. So, and unfortunately, we got police officers dying across this country, probably because they want to make absolutely sure they're in the right. So, and those split-second decisions are hard. And until you're in the position, it's hard to say what you would do. So, it's hard to judge these guys when you say, geez, they shot the kid because he had his cell phone in his hand. Yeah, maybe if it looked like he was pulling a gun, I understand that. I get it, because I was almost there. So, but I will always say, when we have a sixth sense, I swear, everybody has it. Some people are more in tuned, and I always listen to mine, and it always seemed to be right. So when I thought something was wrong, it usually was. So, yeah, that was one of those hair-raising things that I'll never forget as a warden, and there's a lot of them. It's great, because the more I talk, the more I think back on my career, the more experiences that I can share that were there, and especially some of the guys. I really liked working with my guys. I got night hunting cases with all of them except for Jim Sear before I left, and I tried like heck to make a case with him. So I could say before I left that I was with everybody when we made a night hunting case, and I was usually the guy that picked where we were going to do it, how we were going to do it, because I felt like I was in tune with it, and it was awesome to have that experience with the other officers, and it carries on their memories about me and about that night hunting case, and the same with them. So
awesome. Well, Wayne, thank you so much for coming on to the Foul Front. Before we, remind everybody about what you're doing with the Warden's Watch, what do you want to leave the listeners of the Foul Front with?
Yeah, I just want to let them know that the game wardens aren't the enemy. When we come out to check you, it's just to make sure everybody's in compliance, and it's for everybody's benefit. It's for the resource benefit. It's for the hunter's benefit. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we're not the enemy. And as a matter of fact, I hope you're on our side. I hope when you see that violation that you pick up and you call it, whether it's the Operation Game Thief Line or Turn In a Poacher, or International Wildlife Crime Stoppers has all those listed for each state as well, the contact information. So if you're in another state, you can go on their website, click the state, and it tells you how to report poaching. So when there's early shooting, late shooting, over limits that you're experiencing, pick up the phone, be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. If we're all working in this together, the resource benefits from that. And I always think I see these management plans that, are put together, and they forget the law enforcement, because the biologists, I love this word, can biologize all they want. The legislator can put laws into effect, but without law enforcement, it's nothing. We are part of that management plan, and so is the sportsmen. They can put themselves in that management plan by helping us out. And a lot of them do by, buying duck stamps that purchases property. They are part of the solution too. So, but don't forget the law enforcement side. If you see a problem, just don't ignore it and say, yeah, the warden will catch it, because I'm only, one set of eyes and one set of ears. We multiply that by bringing good sportsmen in to look, hey, that guy just shot a whole bunch of ducks, or he started shooting 30 minutes early. And if you get checked, or even if you pick up the phone and say, hey, they were here, this is the plate number they're driving, this is where they were hunting, maybe they're going to do the same thing the next day, or the warden sees that plate again some other place. Now he's got a little bit of information to work. So it helps. And, for you guys to be help to us, I think is an important thing, to be part of that solution and not part of the problem. I guess that's what I want to leave. And, awesome. I support my sportsmen as much as they support me.
Awesome. All right. So if you enjoyed any of this conversation, you need to go check out The Warden's Watch with Wayne Saunders. And so what do you got coming up on The Warden's Watch?
I've got so much in the tube. I'm not sure what I'm going to throw out next. I'm really excited to be doing the podcasting thing. So I've been doing a lot of in-person interviews when I have opportunities. I've got Ohio, who had their biggest deer hunting case ever. I've got a good friend of mine talking about that, who ran the covert operation. So that's coming up this fall. I've got some of my officers that I know, Todd Shefchek, who I came on with, who's probably one of the best investigators I've ever had a chance to work with. He talks about some cases. And it's kind of funny because that's one of my earlier stuff, and I don't have the good quality equipment that I do now. So it's, the handheld microphone type stuff. And so that might be a little choppy. But, I got some other things coming up too. I'm working on some search and rescue stuff for the winter. But I'm going to try to focus on hunting, and I want to throw different things in every now and then. Maybe interview with some biologists so we can get some feel for what they feel and include the law enforcement aspect of it. So I wish I could really tell you what I got coming up. I've got things planned, but I'm not really sure until I get there what I put out. So this last one, I did was with Nick Bronson from Nevada, my first cowboy game warden.
It was a great interview.
Yeah, and I just enjoyed it because, like I said, I grew up reading Lewis L'Amour books, that Western style, and here I got one sitting right in front of me, the cowboy. So that was interesting to me, and I'm hoping if it's interesting to me, it's going to be interesting to the other listeners as well. Just trying to diversify things, make it interesting. I will say the Northwoods Law, the Lone Star Law has certainly helped, I think, in doing the law enforcement, wildlife law enforcement podcast. It seems like those people are gravitating to it as well. And it's kind of the behind the scenes type of the TV shows, the things you probably don't hear about. So it's been fun. I'm having time with it. I hope my colleagues are too. It's their story as much as mine, and I tell them it's their show as much as it's my show. So hopefully we'll continue on. We'll hear some good stories because we all have some good stories.